Hello, I'm Bruce Timm, the producer of this film, and I'm sitting with...
Hi, I'm Grant Morrison, and I'm the writer of the original graphic novel in which the film was based.
And this is, of course, All-Star Superman. I was thrilled to actually be able to do this movie because... I'll embarrass Grant here, but I'm a huge fan of not just Grant and Frank Quietly, but of this comic in particular. I actually feel it's like the quintessential Superman comic of, you know, the last, 50 years or something. It, to me, it kind of boils down everything that's really great about Superman, including even all the stuff that people may think is kind of corny or old-fashioned, but I think Grant has come up with really interesting, fresh, modern takes on all that stuff without going dark and gritty. So, anyhow, that was my take on the comic. So, like I said, I was delighted that we actually were able to make this movie, and apparently Grant likes it. So yeah. I'm so relieved.
No, I really like it. In fact, it's quite embarrassing how much I like it. So, but you know, again, it's a mutual admiration society for me and Bruce here because I've admired his work, and this to me is like is as much as what you did with Batman in the 90s, is to distill that into something that everyone understands, that can work for a wide audience, you know, but to combine all the stuff we love. And often a lot of what people think of the corny elements are the things they love the most, and all they have to do is to be turned a little bit and the light hits them slightly differently, and they're not corny at all, they're heartwarming or heartbreaking.
Yeah, so let me ask you, so, because when I read the comic, I was initially immediately struck by how you really embraced like some of the weirder elements of the Superman mythos, the stuff that people had been like kind of trying to avoid for like 30 years. It's like, no, we got to go dark and gritty. We got Superman serious. He can't have a new superpower every issue. Lois can't be the conniving woman trying to get him married. And you've kind of like I said, you kind of embraced that stuff. Was it like a fresh thing for you? Had you gone back and read like some of those old 50 Superman comics and then said, hey, you know, I really like that. I think I can do something with that?
Yeah, really what it was for me was, you know, like you're trying to get to what does this mean? It's not for fanboys. It's not really about the cataloguing of powers or who's stronger. That was never what I was into, but there was a certain element of comics had gone that way, and it was really about power workouts. And so I came to Superman as, what was it really about? When was it most popular? It was most popular in the 50s and 60s. And why was that? And when I read those stories, it was because they were about human feelings and failings and emotions that we could all understand, but played out on this giant scale. And now that's what I love about comics. You know? Right. Comics can play out jealousy across interplanetary distances. You know, comics can play out hate between two titans that can wreck the planet. And that's how hate feels. And to me, it's like, I never got with the comics that saw realism as, let's make it more about, well, if you had to wear those boots fighting, you couldn't kick, and you... That was such a strange way to look at it, and you yielded a few interesting stories, but ultimately, to me, the greatness of superhero comics, and particularly Superman, was that it was about us. And about us in a much more extended sense than just politically or in some of the ways that we're seen as adult. To me, what was adult about the Mort Wiesinger stories in the 50s and the stuff that he did with his writers was, as I say, they were about hate, they were about love, they were about jealousy, they were about loss, they were about death and life and joy. And you didn't have to know anything about superheroes or their powers or their worlds to get into that. And what they did was make those feelings feel the way they feel in our own lives. Like your wedding feels like the wedding of Superman and Superwoman on a resurrected Krypton in the 505th century if your wedding's to the right person, you know? And I think it's something... Only recently I've even noticed movies starting to realize, well, we can, you know, something like Scott Pilgrim basically played adolescent emotions on the scale of here's how they feel, not how they are. You know? And so that was my thing. Here's how it feels to be a man. You know, here's the problems you face. Here's how difficult it is to explain yourself to the woman when you've done something dumb that seemed to make sense at the time. Or here's how it feels to not be understood by someone you actually admire, like Luther. Or, you know.
Sure.
It was about stuff that we could all feel, is what I guess. And that was a very extended answer. So you go.
No, that's good. Well, I was going to say my other, to go the other end of the spectrum, beyond the personal, human, relatable aspects of the story, another thing I really liked about the comic, and that we tried to incorporate into the movie, is that without putting it like right on the nose, but to me, in this story, Superman is, because we have a tendency, I'm guilty of this as anybody else, to do a Superman story for a modern audience, you're tempted to grit him up, to make him, kind of break his code a little bit so you can piss him off or whatever, so that he can be kind of cool and modern. But like I said, you've kind of embraced the trueness of Superman, in that Superman is such an inherently good person, and without being at all corny or old-fashioned, but he's literally such a good person that his very presence actually makes the world a better place, and even makes Luthor, by the end of it, kind of,
and that's
reform.
also what I love about the new scene you guys added with Luthor, which we'll see later. But I loved that. I know. I wish I'd thought of that one. That was the one. That was the one that got me.
Well, that is basically the idea that you had in the comic, but yeah, just this.
But to see it played out and to see his face was great. So I really liked that.
Add to that the new superpower you exhibited when you saved me, and it's obvious your body is changing radically.
I think actually I wrote you a fan letter to when you were doing new X-Men. Yeah, it was funny because I had read some of your stuff here and there, and when you guys were doing New X-Men, I kind of didn't quite get it. At first, I saw it on the stands, and I kind of went, oh, that looks weird. I'm not going to buy that. And then, like about a year later, when they put out the first collection in trade paperback, it was a slow comic book day. I said, oh, okay, I'll find it. Everybody says this is good. I'll buy it. And I bought it, and I was like totally blown away by it. I was blown away by the art. I was blown away by your fresh take on the material. And again, what you did in that book, exactly what you're doing in All-Star Superman, is that you're kind of embracing exactly what it was about the classic X-Men that you remembered when you were a kid, and you put just enough of a fresh spin on it so that it didn't feel like, oh, you're just retelling the same story, because you really weren't. But it did.
What's the spine of this? What should it be about? And then making it about that again, but updating that to current concerns, rather than what did evolution mean in the shadow of the bomb in the 60s, as opposed to what does it mean now at a time of, social collapse and boundaries breaking down and internet tribes forming. That was suddenly a new vision for me of what mutation meant, because I took it as a metaphor for young people. So yeah, it's the same thing. You're trying to find in all of these things the spine of the character and what it's about.
Yeah. So I mean, just for myself, when I was so blown away by it that I was actually moved to write a fan letter, and I sent it. I emailed it off to the editor, and I guess he forwarded it to Frank and Grant, and they were both kind enough to email me back, and got to know them a little bit through the internet, and then we met up in San Diego, and we go out and have Chinese food occasionally. I get to watch Grant eat the peppers and get like totally red in the face.
Yeah, that's my specialty.
Freeze! Hands above your head. Lex Luthor, you are under arrest for attempted murder and crimes against humanity.
By all means, boys. Take me away.
Can you believe he was smiling when they nabbed him? Said something about friends in high places.
That does seem odd.
The Court of International Justice is talking about reinstating the electric chair, just for him.
Do you ever think about death, Lois?
Don't be morbid, Smallville.
I'm so sorry.
Idiot.
No, it's interesting that you guys in the comic, you kind of went the kind of the Christopher Reeve way of Clark Kent and Superman, because he wasn't really that way in the comics. So this is something I'm assuming you were inspired by in the movie, and you actually went really far in that direction to the point where Frank was actually drawing him as if he literally had like 30 extra pounds when he was Clark Kent, and a lot of it's just in his posture. But I mean, but he also like drew them like literally chubby and kind of an oaf, which I thought was really fascinating. I don't know, is there anything
we thought
behind that?
I mean, the idea with Clark, which was really thought through as well, and one of the early takes on this is I said to quietly, let's do it as basically as Will Eisner doing Superman. So the language is the body language is really bold and extravagant, and they didn't quite go all the way, but you can see it there. So we kind of developed it as, so how would Clark move? And if Eisner was drawing it, and suddenly you have this, the pigeon toes and the hunch, and you can actually see it in your head.
Sure.
And I kind of slouched and I said, look, there's my belly out, and there's me standing up straight like Mummy taught me, and see the difference. And if we play that with Clark,
that's great.
The idea was also to take it away from cowardly Clark, You know, because
right.
we'd seen the milquetoast Clark in the very
Right.
early ones, the cowardly, the spineless worm, and I didn't like that. I didn't think it fit the journalist. So what we decided to do is he's a big man. He comes from the country. He's not used to space, so we made him clumsy,
Right.
so that Superman could constantly be using his physicality. And every time he knocks something over, he's
saving somebody.
Yeah, he's picking up the hot coffee, or he's saving
Right.
the guy from the drop. In the scene we've just seen on there, is saving the guy from the falling wreckage. Everything becomes this constant physical ballet and movement, so that Clark himself becomes an extension of Superman's powers, but through comedy almost.
Very cool. Brilliant.
Give it a try.
Well, I probably take this opportunity to say what a challenge it was to draw this movie in anything close to resembling Frank Quitely's style. Because if you've seen the comic, it's really unique, and I'm a huge Quitely fan. I love his work. And I knew when we talked about doing this movie that we wanted to make it look as much like the comic as possible. But it's tricky because his characters are very, very unique. He draws Superman in a way. I mean, he's got the big trunks, and he's kind of thick. He kind of looks like the old Wayne Boring Superman in a way, weird kind of way. But he also his face is. It's not the typical American style. It's not Jack Kirby or John Buscema or Neil Adams, view of a handsome man. He's kind of. He's kind of got this little pout, those little poochy lips.
He's like a classical statue,
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, I was going to say there's a very. I feel like there's a big European influence in Quitely style. It reminds me of like Mobius or Jeff Darrow or something. And then so to try to make it look like his design, but also still make him handsome, and also still make it so that the animators in Korea could draw him consistently. Yeah. Boy, it was really, really tough. It took us a lot of R&D to.
But it worked out. I mean, how specifically? I mean, are you going into each of the space between his nose and his mouth?
Oh yeah,
I mean, everything's got to be like.
Well, the trickiest thing was honestly because Quitely draws him different in every panel. I mean, some panels he looks almost exactly like that, and in some panels he has a rounder face. Some panels he actually looks almost like classically handsome, and Lois is the same way. Yeah. So it was really tricky to find. It's like, okay, well, if we base it on that one specific drawing, that doesn't quite really look like Superman, or doesn't really look like Quitely. So we need to kind of find another, in between drawing or whatever. But so it was a lot of back and forth. I give all our credit to our lead character designer, a guy named John Suzuki, who actually kind of cracked the Quitely code eventually. And I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. I mean, I think it could still look a little bit more Quitely-ish, but I don't
know. I mean, I watched it obviously. And I just I thought it was great. I mean, what you got from his work was the compositions and the way the characters appear. I mean, so much of it just starts moving from a Quitely drawing or moves into a Quitely drawing, which I thought was amazing.
Well, when you mentioned the compositions, that was another trick too, is because Quitely uses a lot of empty space, a lot of negative space. And I don't know if it's just because he doesn't feel like drawing detailed backgrounds and knows the colorist will fill it in, or if it's literally an intentional design. But so we knew that going in that, if we wanted to keep that kind of spare background styling, we needed to make sure that it looked spare but not cheap. We didn't, because again, when you see it in the comic, when it's got that lush color on it and everything, it doesn't feel empty. But we were really concerned that in the film that a big black or a big blank space behind the characters would look kind of, just empty, or like we didn't feel like drawing an elaborate background. So I think for the most part it works. There are some scenes that work better than others, and this is right out of the comic. This is based on that.
What a great scene that is, where he's sowing stars.
So,
Farmer Superman.
What's in here?
Well, one of the things we did to try to keep it Quitely-ish is, besides just giving them our model sheets that we normally do, is we actually scanned the entire comic and sent it over to them as a zillion PDF files and said, when in doubt, look at the comic. It's like, yeah, we've storyboarded it, we've given you all the layouts and everything, but here's the comic. Study it as much as we have. So, I don't know how much they actually referred to it in Korea, but it looks like they did their homework. So,
yeah, I mean, I see
right.
There's so many setups and actual panels that and I love the way characters move into them sometimes, and in other cases they move directly out of them. But
I mean, it's tricky because there's some things that, frankly, there's things that were in the comic that worked better than actually work in live action. Specifically, coming up is when Lois actually shoots the kryptonite gun at Superman. Quitely did this great drawing of Lois, and her feet are kind of off the ground, and she's kind of recoiling backwards. It's in here, But when you see it in real time, it doesn't quite have the same impact that lovely drawing did. And the same thing with Lois in the shower. It's like, that's like one of the best drawings of a woman I've ever seen in a comic. It's so natural and it's sexy, but it's innocent. And she's not like this big, giant bosomed woman. She's like, kind of petite. And it's like, it's in the movie, but it still doesn't quite have that same charm that the original did. But whatever. It's not to criticize the animators because they did a great job.
But also, I mean, I think what you get, the effect that it has is actually to have this classic animation. I mean, to me, it has this kind of 30s look because, again, we wanted that almost Disney-esque, Fleischer Studios look, and having the wider spaces, the quietly setups, give it that kind of cinematic. I think it works. It's got that weird kind of. It's as if it's always been there, but yet it's modern. It's so strange, which was the effect he was trying to get.
Well, that totally makes sense.
And think of, what this Winsor McKay's such a big influence on Frank Quitely,
absolutely.
and he's the first animator, so you can see the leap from of simplifying that style into something, so to me this works completely. I mean, look at that with the letterbox and it's all horizontal spaces, which is what Superman needs, the sense of space, the American cinema scope.
Right.
And this great bit, this is if you're watching this with your wife or girlfriend. I
wonder
for real.
I wonder what people are going to think of this because she does seem to be. I mean, it's funny when we're watching. When we were making this film, we're thought kind of okay. So, does she sound too paranoid or does she sound? It's like we don't want to make her sound like she's crazy because you want to be in the moment with her. You want to trick the audience into thinking that I don't know. Maybe Superman is planning to kill her or whatever. But it was tricky to kind of find that fine line. But
also
I think
the
it worked.
bottle did it, the water, the little thing with the water trick worked because she's actually, you can see she's drinking too fast. Something's not right.
Well, I had a feeling she had dry mouth. I had a feeling, that's a weird reference, but I had a feeling her mouth had gotten kind of cottony. So that may be a tip off. But yeah. But yeah, this is again, this is one of my favorite scenes in the comic because it was just like, it's almost, that they did this story in Lois Lane comics back in the 50s, probably 3 times a year where Lois, thought Superman was out to kill her. So I thought you guys did a really clever way of updating that kind of storytelling.
And it's the Bluebeard story because we wanted to tie that in. Where she's taken to the guy and he says, "Don't look in the room. It's the only room in the castle you mustn't go in."
Right.
But it's that, but inverted because in Superman everything's a happy ending rather than an unhappy ending.
That's funny. I hadn't thought of that, but that's exactly what it is.
The other thing I liked about the whole structure of this as well is that because it was based on the issues and they were so kind of tight and and the way Dwayne composed the scenes, it feels like every single scene has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then you're on to something new, but it moves so organically. And I was really quite impressed by the condensing so much but each scene pays off. It's very tightly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Well, when we first started talking about doing All-Star Superman as one of our movies, we actually talked about this years ago. Gregory Novak actually mentioned it. He said, "Oh yeah, he was a big fan of the comics." He said, "Why don't you guys do that for one of your movies?" And at the time, I was a little bit reluctant because I kind of thought, well, at that time we were thinking, okay, these are PG-13 movies. We're trying to deliberately make them look a little bit edgier for an older audience, and this isn't really that. And B, the episodic nature of the comic is it's not really a graphic novel. It's actually a series. It's actually like a monthly series, and it doesn't really have it does have an overall arc, but it's not like a self-contained story the way, say, Dark
it's more
Knight
like
Returns.
it was meant to be like a TV series arc, so that you would have individual episodes, but a subplot that would then pay off in the season finale. That was what it was kind of based on. Right.
So, there were some issues in it. For instance, later on in the story, when Lilo and Bar-El show up, that was the one sequence that I thought, okay, does that kind of feel like it's just kind of plunked in there and it doesn't really fit in everything else? It's like, but then I started looking at it, and it's like, it's so similar to Superman 2 with the Kryptonian villain, so everybody kind of already knows that story anyways. So you don't really have to play the whole story out. You kind of know how it starts and stops. And the most important thing is that it kind of shows, again, going back to my point about Superman, that he really is just this genuinely decent guy. These 2 people from Krypton are treating him horribly. They're horrible people, and yet he does everything he can to save them and forgive them. And that's really important for the whole story. That's like, what the whole story is about. So, and also I think in the sense that the movie's already been so generous with characters and things, you'd be really upset if you didn't get another 2 in That's true. That's true.
I think it's there's so much. You're just waiting for the next scene. What cool thing's going to happen next?
Right. Well, that sequence in particular, the Bar-El and Lilo sequence, I was still on the fence about it, whether it actually worked or not, until we heard the music that Chris Drake had done for it. And he did such a wonderful job with the music. It's got this huge, lush, epic score. And I'm watching it kind of going, yeah, when they go into the Phantom Zone, I'm actually getting kind of choked up about it. And I'm like, I don't even like these characters. They're horrible people. But the music's kind of swelling, and Superman's so sincere, and Arnold Vosloo playing Bar-El is really sincere, and it totally works. It's like, wow, it shouldn't work, but it really does. So I was really happy about this.
The last thing I wanted on your special day was a reptile invasion from the Earth's core.
I'd have felt cheated if there weren't monsters. Come on, let's save Metropolis.
I think we're a little late.
Metropolis, Crow will eat your children.
And these characters, again.
And this was fantastic. It was great to see.
Again, this is something we kind of struggled with. It's like we looked at the designs and we looked at the story and went, wow, these guys are so bizarre. They're so not what you expect to see in an American superhero film, because they're such a throwback. But again...
And this music was great with it. You know?
Hilarious. But again, it's like, you know, it kind of works. It's really bizarre. I mean, where did Atlas and Samson come from for you in the comic? What was your inspiration to put them in the story?
Well, I wanted the story to be more than just Superman and Lois out for birthday and not much happens. So we had the dinosaur invasion to get the thing kicked off, but then there was an old cover. It was one of those classic 50s covers, I think, where it's Lois and Lana, and they're walking along the street, and Superman's in his usual gasp, what has happened while I've been away. And Lois has got, I think it's Atlas on one arm, and Lana's got Hercules on the other arm. And you just hear he's saying, what's happened? What are you doing with these guys? And she goes, while you've been gone, well, I'm Mrs. Hercules, and I'm Mrs. Atlas. And just, the idea of suddenly Superman having to kind of fight these demigods, just, you know, it's like they've turned up on her birthday. The whole thing turns into this, and reducing it all to a playground brawl to allow Superman to be macho a little bit as well.
Sure.
Because we hadn't seen him for a long time, not even in this, but in comics, you know, in the 70s he used to be quite boastful, and it's ridiculous. When you read it now, he's ridiculous, you know, when he's beating up his enemies. Batman was the same. He was constantly like, hey, you're completely useless, you knucklehead, and put him down. So I wanted a little of that back in it, and these seemed like great characters to introduce, to update, and to take that idea of the biblical strongman, also to take it away from the comic book universe and into something we all understood.
So it's like mythology.
Yeah, everyone's heard of Hercules and Atlas. It's rather than introducing Mr. Majestic or...
Right.
So there was that in there, I guess.
That's cool. Well, it's the reason I think you can buy it is because when Superman meets them for the first time, he's clearly familiar with them, and so even though the audience has no idea who they are, it's just kind of like, okay, Superman accepts them, so we'll accept them as well.
Some super strongman's club. You know?
Right, exactly, right.
And they know the names, so they're guessing, I get it. Okay.
I mean, the last movie we did was a Batman movie, and it was very dark, and when we showed it at San Diego, the audience went crazy for it, and they thought, wow, this is like the best movie you guys have ever made, and it was interesting to watch the reaction of the fans at San Diego. They were literally like cheering every act of violence. Yeah. You know, because they're just so not used to seeing that in a cartoon. So it's like, I kind of know that there's that audience. I don't know if this movie's going to resonate with them the same way. I hope so. Because like I said, I think this is really something special. I think to me, it's like, it is quintessentially Superman.
I think it'll resonate with them too for completely different reasons. Because you don't get that in anything else. I'm hoping that it'll resonate on that level. Comic fans, I hope, will think they really did a good job there. They were very faithful. They were very respectful of the material, but took chances where it was needed. Well, it's like I say, it's kind of embarrassing when you're starting. This is really great, you know. This is pretty good. So I'm trying to just put all the kudos over on the other side of the room. But no, it's fantastic. I love this movie. I've got 3 favourite superhero movies, and this is the third one. The Unbreakable and Walt Disney's Hercules are the other 2.
Really, Walt Disney's Hercules? Interesting.
It's my favourite superhero movie.
I haven't even seen it. Well, I was going to say my absolute favorite superhero movie is also a cartoon. It's the Incredibles. It's my favorite.
Yeah, well, that's good too.
Humor me, it's my birthday.
Superheroes in film are tough. I mean, they're admittedly easier to do in cartoons, I think, to a degree, because the whole world is of a piece. So a guy wearing, red and blue spandex doesn't look quite as ridiculous as he does in a live-action film. But yeah, live-action films especially, it's, everybody always errs on the side of, darkening the costumes or putting them in something that doesn't look like spandex. And, it's like that's kind of an essential part of the character is, they wear silly costumes. You kind of have to do it, but...
And when people dress up as superheroes, they wear costumes. Basically, that's what a superhero really is. For all you can do, you can play the tricks and you can put them in trench coats. But when someone thinks of a superhero, there's a cape involved, there's boots, there's a belt.
Right. And their underwear on the outside. I mean, whenever we're doing one of these adaptations of a specific comic, it depends. Sometimes we don't feel too beholden to the comic, because if sometimes the comic is just a good starting point, and then we feel like we can kind of take it in our own direction. But this one, again, and I'm not just kissing Grant's butt just to be doing it, but I genuinely loved this comic, and so to do it, when we decided we were going to do it, I wanted to make sure that it was as true to the comic as possible. I mean, the number one mandate is always still to make just a good movie, period. But whenever we can, we wanted to find what it was about the comic that was great and bring that to the screen intact. So a lot of times, I mean, in a situation like this, I sublimate my own sensibilities somewhat to a degree. It's like there's things in here that normally I wouldn't have thought to do, or that go against the grain of the way I would tell a story or the way I would design a character. So it's hard sometimes. It's like, okay, shut off the Bruce Timm. Bruce Timm go sit in a closet somewhere. Now just be, the adapter or the translator, and it's tricky, but I'm happy that Grant's happy with the movie, because that was my ultimate challenge was whether I think it's good or not. I would be destroyed if Grant didn't like it.
But the fact that so much dialogue actually survived, which I really liked as well, which again makes me slightly embarrassed to say I love it so much, because it was...
Because you wrote it?
It was really, I really appreciated how much of the dialogue was allowed to be retained, because I think it gave it a particular cadence that was different from the other Superman things we've seen, a slightly different, more... wasn't quite the pace we're used to.
Well, recently we try to go kind of... it's not like naturalistic, but almost naturalistic, like slightly heightened reality. Yeah. But yours is even more highly, heightened reality. It's like Lois's line that she just said. There's like, wow, imagine, a race of subterranean, lizard people at the Earth's core. It's kind of goofy and old fashioned, but she says it with such sincerity that it's just like you kind of buy it. So, but a lot of the dialogue is that way. And there was a great line in the comic, which we didn't do in the movie, was when he was making those little stars on his cosmic anvil, when he goes, "Look out, Lois!" It's just kind of like this exuberant kind of big boy man thing to say. It's like,
But at least you managed to keep, I'll show you my time telescope. Which
right, of course. Which is another big, boy man moment.
Yeah, but, just as you're about to get a kiss, no way, I'll show you my time telescope.
Right. So he really is the Boy Scout to a degree. But and I love this sequence too. Yeah. This is the kind of thing that it always bugged me in Superman 2 when Superman goes back to that bar and beats up the bully. I always think, that's just Superman wouldn't do that. But here he can do it with these guys because they're kind of as strong as he is, so he can kind of...
Yeah, that's the way we would do it, and these are arrogant bully types, so that's okay. But no, it was wrong for him to go back and do it to a human.
To an unpowered guy, right.
And he just wouldn't have done that, but that's a great moment.
A total little throwaway that's just like, it just says, it speaks volumes. It's like, there's this whole other world that Superman inhabits.
But just the romanticism, the lyricism, I mean, it's nice to see it survive intact,
Well, we tried really hard. I know, it's like, it's even the composer, he's done a lot of our movies for us, Chris Drake, and he's used to doing like these angry, aggressive scores for like Batman movies and such. And here he's like, okay, I have to write pretty music.
And that classic is this.
And that's awesome.
Perfect recreation of that scene.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, something like that is tricky because that was like a full-page splash in the comic. And it's something that we always struggle with when we're doing in the film adaptation is there is no filmic equivalent of the full-page splash.
No.
Because every panel is always exactly the same. So you have to always figure out, okay, you can't just pan up the character. you have to kind of figure out what the equivalent composition would be to get that point across. But I think that was one that actually worked.
Besides being Superman.
You do a great Clark Kent imitation. You almost had me fooled. Wait till I tell him about all this.
Lois?
I love this little sequence here with Lois and Superman, just tucking her in at night and giving her a little chaste kiss. Yeah, it may not be sexy, but you know what? It's still cool. I mean, it's hard sometimes to do a character who is as good as Superman, and it's a little bit easier to do it in one movie than in a continued series of things, because after a while you just kind of go, oh God, this guy is so good. He never loses his temper, and he's never this or he's never that. Actually, in the comic, you guys did have him lose his temper, which was actually really interesting, but he still stays genuine. He still he's a decent guy. I mean,
But it's kind of we tried to say, okay, let's do that guy because he hasn't been seen for so long.
Right.
And you know,
Right.
I was a bit militant and punk about it, where I really began to think, why is it corny to be for the good guy? What's wrong with it? Who are we kidding?
Right.
You know, but because inside us, we want to see that. We all look at that guy when it's done right and it makes you feel good. Your chest swells a little bit. And there was I can't remember the exact source of this, but they did some poll among older women, and it was basically, no, it was men, sorry. It was basically, how they said to men, how would you like yourself to be seen? And it was a checklist, one of those things. And basically what they checked themselves as amounted to Superman.
really.
And it was to be seen as a nice guy, and for older ladies to like me, and for young women to really fancy me, and for other men to look up to me. But to be humble and and so I took it from that basically and said, this is our dream of what we are, because we know that on our best days we can actually be that.
Right.
So let's say, okay, he's this guy. And
Yeah.
hey, what about that in your face? You know, because we've seen Wolverine, we've seen Batman going dark. We know that's cool stuff, but
Sure.
there's something even cooler. My rebel spirit tells me there's something about our society that fears this.
Well, you know, the thing is, when you adapt a comic into a film or animation, even, it's just a different language. You know, there are things that work great in a comic, and even if you look at them in the comic and you think, oh, that's very cinematic, the minute you actually try to do it in film, it's like, okay, you realize there's something missing, or there's something that doesn't quite work the same way. And like I talked before about how, you know, like that's something everybody takes for granted in a comic. It's like, you want a big moment, you either do it in a full page splash or a double page splash. There's no such equivalent in a film. You know, it doesn't work. You'll notice in the very beginning of the film, when we're doing that whole that prologue that you did in the comic, you know, with the, you know, doomed planet, desperate scientists, and that there was that in the comic, there was that wonderful 2-page splash that Frank had done of Superman flying out of the sun, and it's like, there's no way to get that kind of impact if the film is moving. So we did like the kind of Matrixy trick, you know, we did the slow down and froze him for a moment, and then had him take off. It's still not quite the same thing as. Like I said, there's just no equivalent of the 2-page splash in
But that's
film.
part of it, is the translation, isn't it? Is to find an answer to that, and to find something that works. But
That would have that same kind of impact, yeah. But, and again, you know, a lot of what makes an image like that work so well in the comics is just his wonderful draftsmanship, you know, and the heart and the feel that he puts into it. Yeah, so it's tricky. It's, you know, it's that way anytime we do any of the comic book adaptations. So, like I said, I'm just relieved this one kind of came close to the mark, I think. And like I said, Grant was happy with it. Hopefully Frank will like it when he sees it.
What would you do if you had his powers?
Help people?
You probably would. You lack the imagination to see the alternatives.
That's kind of a weird little beat. Metallo doing the lifting weights. It's like, well, why is he lifting weights? Because he doesn't have muscles. He's a robot. But, you know, so we debated about whether we should leave that in. The board guy just threw that in there. It's like, I think it's funny. Just leave it in there.
it's just as scary, isn't it? It's just like sitting there doing it. He was great.
Parasite's awesome.
Horrific in this.
Yeah, they did a really good job with the animation, because he's really disgusting. It's, boy, I'll tell you, when we were doing the looping, the ADR, every time we'd back up the shots and have to, like, you know, stop on a shot of, like, you know, Parasite with that just disgusting lower half. All the women in the room were just like, this is such a boy movie. But he's cool.
No, it's great. It's when his mouth starts to swing like a hammock.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. When it starts getting like really, yeah, he's just all mouth after a while.
And to bring in that effect, the 3D effect's really good. We can actually see him absorbing people's power.
Well, I mean, this is a little bit different than the comic. I mean, in the comic, yeah, he was just kind of like he was kind of tied up like Hannibal Lecter, kind of out in the open. It's just for the ease of storytelling, and you also in the comic, you also had this thing where Luthor was kind of creating his own society of criminals in the prison. But again, that was something that's kind of like that would have just gotten in the way of the story that we were telling in this short period of time. So we kind of just forgot about that whole aspect of the story. A lot of it is just sometimes if you throw too many ideas in a short space, nothing will read. So, you know, it's different in a comic when you actually have the time to like read it and absorb it, but in something that's moving at this speed, you know, you kind of have to, you know, learn to stay on track and not go off on tangents. So.
Yeah, it was easier to see him in jail, though, to establish that. You know, we already had Luthor coming down the stairs because he was kind of talking about, you know, it was an underworld thing and
right.
all these characters. It was all kind of symbolic with a 3D bizarre layout that Frank Quitely had come up with. But what you had to do was just basically establish the monster.
Right.
And I think you had to show the cells there.
That's tear gas, you idiot!
This is where the parasite starts getting really, really bizarre and extreme.
But it's good. It still has that old school. It's got that slightly, you know, it's the old school kind of Fleischer feel, I think, with the big, bulky, gaping monsters, creatures from the abyss.
I like how you guys actually had Clark, like, still, like you said, still being Superman, even when he's Clark Kent. This is something that, honestly, I never even bothered doing this in our old TV show when we did the Superman show. I never really thought about it. But it's a great bit that he's like, you know, surreptitiously, you know.
And it allowed him to be seemingly clumsy all the time, you know, because he had a reputation for coughing and stumbling and tripping up. And so he was constantly using it to his advantage.
You know, it's a good gimmick. And like you said, it kind of just shows that, to me, it's like that he's always Superman.
Yeah,
even
and you
when
can
he's
tell Superman stories like this one where he doesn't even appear in the original issue. He doesn't appear in costume
right.
in the whole thing. You know, and we're good. Why not be like this? Why not be proud and stop sneaking around in the dark being embarrassed? So you never know. These moments can come in fashion, and I think Superman's turn might. I hope this movie hits those people. You know, those kids who are starting to dress up in primary colours again.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think this movie's really good. I'm very proud of it, and like I said, I'm thrilled that you like it. I have no idea what an audience is going to think of it.
Earthquake!
Well, even like this bit right here where he creates the earthquake, I actually think that was staged better in the comic, because in the comic he was actually around the corner from Luthor. He wasn't actually in the same. He wasn't within eye line of Luthor when he hit the ground and caused the earthquake. But I don't know. We staged it this way for some reason. I don't know why, but it still works.
This is the Luthor you want to see.
Emptying the clip. What I love about this scene is that he goes off on him and he's vicious and murderous, and then he turns right around and says, "I've always liked you, Ken."
I've always liked you, Kent. You're humble, modest, comically uncoordinated, human. In short, you're everything he's not. I'm going to give you a present.
Well, you know, I always have the issue that when I do one of these things with a new cast is that I made so many episodes of Superman with Clancy Brown playing Lex Luthor and Tim Daly playing Superman, that whenever I recast these parts, it takes me a while to get used to other people playing them. And when we first get the footage back and we're looking at the picture and the new voices, something's like kind of going, okay, this isn't right. Something's wrong. I don't know, is the animation weird or is the voice acting wrong? And after a while, like you said, I realize it's just me.
Yeah.
I'm just getting used to hearing these new actors.
But are you going for specifics in the same way that, say, with the animation, you'd work that face down? You're thinking, I want an actor who can portray a specific quality of this
Yes.
Superman that's very different from...
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, because we could have just cast these with the guys we used before, and it probably would have been fine. Lois, especially, I thought she needed to sound younger because when I look at her in the comic with her little mini skirt and the way she dresses, and she just seemed, even personality-wise, she didn't seem like a full grown-up yet to me. She seems almost like she's barely out of her teens. And she's a little bit more, even though she's still kind of snappy and cynical, she's a little bit more innocent than we're used to seeing Lois Lane. So I definitely wanted to find an actress who had a younger sounding voice. So I thought Christina Hendricks is actually like perfect. And then for Superman, again, going back to what I was saying about him being really pure and genuinely good, we wanted to find somebody who didn't have a trace of irony or badass in his voice. Yeah. And James Denton's name came up, and I'm familiar with his work on Desperate Housewives, and he's turns out to be perfect. I mean, he just sounds like the nicest guy in the world. And the thing is, when you meet him in real life, he really is this guy. He's that nice in real life, which is amazing. Wow. He's actually so nice that a couple times in the movie where he needs to actually be a little bit more macho or badass, we kind of had to really push him because it's like, no, okay, you gotta butch up a little bit there, James. But ultimately, we got it. But I think his like I said, his genuineness, I think, really comes through in the movie. But and then Anthony LaPaglia as Luthor, I think he's really brilliant. I think he's really, really good. I mean, he's again not drastically different than what, say, Clancy Brown would have done, but just I don't know. He brings us just a slight differentness to it. So
I never hear voices at all except when I've seen a movie. So it impinges on me when I've seen a performance like with Chris Reeve, for instance. So I don't usually I hear runs of dialogue and I hear characters talking, but I don't actually hear them in specific actors' voices. Or, you know, I've got a kind of generic Philadelphia voice for Bruce Wayne in my head. That plays.
That's
and there's a kind of Clark Kent Midwestern East Coast twang. So yeah, I mean, I guess, but not specific, not like actors. So this was again really new to me, very interesting. At first, I was quite like, this is weird, this doesn't sound right. And then a few moments into it, started to. The actors seemed to get the rhythm, and I realised it was me who was getting the rhythm.
That's funny.
You know, and as you say, the dialogue's not naturalistic in that way. It's like play dialogue almost.
Yeah, it is, right.
And it's trying to be very pure, and as I said to you, in the way that, because I just saw that scene again, you know, she's saying our children will go flying, and that's how it feels. It's not anything you'd ever say, but it's kind of how the feeling is.
Exactly.
When you're saying to someone, no, we'll always be together, and it'll be you and I forever, and our children. It's that without being Harold Pinter. It's like taking it to the other end and saying, I thought that really worked, and the fact that they could convey that type of thing.
I mean, the actors did struggle with it a little bit every now and then. They'd get to one of those lines and they'd say it and they just go, God, I don't know, that sounds really bad. You know, it's like, you want me to do that over? And it's like, well, I don't know. I know what you're saying because it doesn't really sound natural. It's the kind of thing that you kind of have to, yeah, like you said, it almost is theatrical.
Yeah.
But
so everything's famous last words. I mean, everything's kind of
right.
Sorry if I startled you. It's been a long trip, and I'm feeling a bit under the weather.
Yeah, that was a tricky cut to pull off because he's going to go off, and he says his big goodbye to Lois, and he's gone for like whatever it is, months, and then whoop, he's back. It's like, I know you guys had the luxury of doing that in between issues. You had a month in between
issues,
right? But it kind of works. And like I said, this sequence here, I'm amazed this works because I was really worried about it. Because I thought this is the one episode that really doesn't seem super tied to all the other stories. But I really like it. I really like it a lot. It's really neat.
Well, I was accidentally buried underneath Stryker's Island during the prison.
Yeah, and it's the love story thing as well, you know. It's also it's like parents. It's kind of you didn't really get to see the parents, so at least by having this story in, you get to see them taken care of because they kind of stood in for, you know, sick relatives, and it was that sense of obligation to people. So again, because every story was supposed to be about something that was we could all relate to, and it was that idea of visiting hospitals and looking after someone at the end and trying to find ways. So I think it really thematically absolutely ties in. I'm sure that's what guided your clever decision to make sure it stayed. And like I said, I think that because of the episodic nature of it, it's just you want another episode, and here it comes, and it feels really good right here. It's like Superman's life is this busy.
Right. Well, it's just interesting that like this whole segment doesn't really have anything to do with, I mean, directly with Lois or anything to do with the Luthor plot or anything. It's really, it's all about Superman. But again, this is one of my favorite bits from the comic is when, you know, one of those great lines that's like nobody would ever say in real life is, "You've broken the moon." Yeah, that's such a Grant Morrison thing to say. But it's like, I'm really glad to.
You'd be surprised how often I have to say that.
I'm sure. But yeah, it's like one of those things. It's like, yeah, that's how big this is. It's like, yeah, you broke the moon. It's like, well, you know, it's not just you're a bad guy. It's like, wow.
Again, it's as bad as you just broke the family China.
Exactly.
It's
right?
that moment where it says it's gone too far. Hang on.
You just moved into my fortress?
Shouldn't have left the key lying around.
We had every right.
This was great, you know, because we couldn't animate that in the book, and it was great to see that. The fight scenes in particular were great because we never had space for the fight scenes. I was really desperately trying to fit everything into 22 pages. Now, this is all about craft, and I will not, you know, usually I overspill and I go into 2 or 4, 3 more pages. So this one I was on myself. So we just couldn't take the time to do the big fight scenes that we'd have loved to have done, or even more big double page spreads or anything like that. I think it still worked, but
oh yeah, it did.
To see it played out, particularly the Luthor fight at the end, and the stuff with these characters, this is an amazing moment. This whole when he gets thrown at the moon and thrown back at Earth, it's just we've never seen anything like that in any movie before.
Replace me after I'm gone.
So, and also particularly with Frank Quitely, I mean those scenes are almost exact recreations, which is amazing. But he likes to capture the moment after or before the action. And that's his thing, you know. Kirby would always capture the moment of the explosive contact.
Right.
And Quitely likes to do just running up to the punch or just after the punch when everything's flying. And he freeze frames, kind of, you know, debris and hair flying and sweat drips. And to see those moments in between kind of adds a completely different 360 to it all.
Well, I was going to say, in your guys' defense, I never thought that was a detriment of the comics. That when I would finish an issue of All-Star Superman, I never once said, God, this comic would have been even better if they had big, long fight scenes in it. So, you know, sometimes we have a tendency in our movies to make the fight scenes go on a little bit too long because our board artists actually like to stage them, and we know that to a degree, you know, our audience does like to look at big action sequences. But here, I don't think they go on too long. I think they're just right. I feel like they're there in the service of the story. It's not like, okay, now we need to stop and have a big fight scene. So.
I know you're behind me, Steve, so whatever you're doing, just stop.
That's a very quietly composition, just the big blank wall.
Yeah. My favourite of his, the blank wall.
Well, I'm just relieved that it looked right, that it actually feels the way it does in the comic, that it actually feels almost like a stage, like a proscenium. So rather than just like, oh, we didn't feel like designing a background.
And on all the arrangements, because he loves his Renaissance kind of arrangements and perspectives and compositions. And to see a line of characters, he likes to draw that a lot, that kind of Last Supper lineup of all the characters.
Sure. Well, it's also very... I want to say it's almost very kind of Stanley Kubrick-y in a way, weird kind of ways, just to have the character or the camera be like 20 feet away. You know, the horizon line is just, you know, flat. There's no angle. There's no dynamic perspective. It's just everybody's just kind of, you know, symmetrical.
Yeah.
But
and a huge blank curved wall or something.
Right.
Like that.
No!
Yeah, this is all like right out of the comic.
Yeah, I think the more it goes on as well, I think it becomes even more like it. People are be quite surprised. Continually see scenes they're so familiar with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Superman's a little trickier because Batman is a little bit more kind of like automatically cool, you know, quote unquote cool, whereas Superman is a little bit more of a, he's primary, you know, he's primary colors, he's red, yellow, and blue, literally, you know. But there is something, like you said, there's that ideal that he's the kind of guy that, you know, if you really thought about it, you would really like to be that guy. But
and the times change, you know, and black leather can also start to seem a bit. Old
totally.
Has your parents' parties, you know, suddenly, and all the kids are kind of back into the psychedelic stuff. The colour, I've noticed it in everything, you know. The fact that Alice in Wonderland is big again, like it was in the 60s. Or there's certain times I think are more colourful, you know, and kids are wearing colour again. Maybe Superman's turn is suddenly to stand there and go, hey, he's been standing flamboyantly saying, we're cool after all.
Hail, son of Krypton, I'm proud to call you my kin. Our greatness lives on in you.
We don't have much time.
There's a way to save us both. Surely you've thought of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we tried, again, just taking our cue right from the comic is that, to me, that the story wasn't really all about just, you know, big, crazy set pieces in action and fight scenes, even though it does have that. But it is all character-based, and so it kind of needed these quieter moments. I mean, this scene here, which is amazing, like I said it before, but this is like one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, and it shouldn't be. It's like, but that music is awesome, and the visuals are great. That looks like a Frank Quietly drawing. They're holding their hands is like sweet. It's like, yeah, I shouldn't care at all about these two characters because they're horrible people. But, you know, it's like I feel glad that they go off into the Phantom Zone. But, I mean, I do kind of wish we'd done the twist that, you know, now there's going to be justice in the Phantom Zone. But we didn't do that.
Yeah, it's a pity. I'd quite like to see him because he remains violent to the end.
But here it just kind of ties into his next meeting with Luthor, which is, again, this is a great scene in the comic, and I think it kind of works in the movie. But
well, again, you know, I think we've seen the big battle scenes. To do something small like this is between these two super powerful men now. We've seen what they're both capable. We know who they are, and to just keep it like this, to not have, we'll get the battle later, but this worked really well.
Yeah.
And staying on it like that, it's great.
And this is another neat little scene. Again, it's not directly from the comic. You guys did that whole great issue with Paul Kent dying, which we didn't do here, but so we did this instead, which is kind of a combination of that scene and maybe something. It kind of reminds me of the Donner film. But
well, I had his mother dead. His mother was dead in mine, so they'd both kind of passed on as they had in the earlier stories. So
I missed that.
I didn't think to reintroduce.
Of course not. I just wanted to leave a flower. It's Kryptonian.
Yeah, Superman does say goodbye a lot in this movie. It's like he says goodbye to Lois like 5 times at the end, but that's okay.
He's Superman. He can say it as many times as he likes. He's saying it to us all. That's what I like to think about the story. It's goodbye to everyone.
Do you miss him?
Every day. But his spirit is always with us. So, you have time to eat, or do you have to go save the world?
Oh, I thought the music was great. You know, when I saw the first 20 minutes of this a month or so ago, Jeff Johns allowed me to see it, and there was no music. I was kind of impressed then, but I knew the music was going to make all the difference, and it really does. I mean, music is what comics are missing, you know, and it's great to see Superman with a score, because every time Superman does something, there should be a score. And the comics just can't provide that. So, no, I thought the music was great, and it really worked. It hit all the right emotional beats.
I think that the challenge that Chris had when he was doing the score, and straight up, you know, when he asked me, he said, "What kind of music do you envision in this movie?" And I kept saying, "Well, we try to avoid, because there is kind of like a default setting for superhero movies where it's like it's orchestral and it's this and it's that, and there's the male choir and all that stuff, and you've heard it in a zillion movies." So we said, okay, we don't want it to sound like that, and we don't want it to sound specifically like John Williams, because that's, you know, specifically the Donner films. But at the same time, that stuff is kind of appropriate. You know, it's like, no, I don't want an avant-garde score just to have it, you know, electronica score or whatever, or a rock and roll score. So it kind of needed to be orchestral. So, but beyond that, beyond saying, okay, I don't want it to sound like John Williams, I didn't know what else to tell him. But then we started talking about the movie thematically, and I kept saying, it's kind of a myth. It's kind of a fable. You know, it's kind of a grown-up fable. So Chris said, okay, I kind of get that. And then we were just talking about different composers and everything, and I said, you know, it's got to be pretty. It's lush. It's more romantic than bombastic. It's not Star Wars. It's lush and romantic. And he goes, okay, now I got it. And that's kind of what he was going after in the movie, and I think he kind of nailed it. So
no, it's good. It's a great dimension to be able to think in, you know, because you think, oh, what would it be like, Batman with Philip Glass? You know, all the possibilities that music suddenly gives to the way a character could look, or, and it's something we miss in the comics.
Right.
I'm still going to miss him.
Are you all right?
Superman's journal.
And his eyes to do this, because we used the machine to do it.
Right.
I'm running out of time.
I know, it's such a big crate.
Great.
It's like he can't just write it like in the computer like a normal person. He's got to have this gigantic monolithic, you know, diary. But it's really cool.
That's what it is, you know, because if people could if they just realised, that's how he does it. I've got a diary, but he's just doing the same thing. But it'd be boring to see him writing in a diary.
Well, the weird thing is that it doesn't make him look like a jerk. It doesn't make him look like, I need to have the world's largest diary. It feels like natural to him to be doing it.
This is what he would build in the little King Arthur bit at the end there he got with the taking off the crown. Well, I wish I could say that was one of mine, because it actually wasn't. Back in the Silver Age, Superman actually did inscribe his diary on a gigantic steel page.
Oh, awesome.
And so we updated it and kind of used the machinery and the telepathic contacts, which we kind of had as a signifier of Kryptonian culture, and that maybe he was using the machine telepathically and he had access to, you know, the sort of stuff that his dad wore or Brainiac had embedded in his head. So we kind of just we updated that concept, but I couldn't say that was mine, you know. But it was just too good to waste. The idea of Superman writing in this gigantic steel diary is so brilliant.
I was going to say it totally felt Silver Age-ish, but also very, very fresh and very much like something you would do. So it's, to me, that's the kind of magic of this book.
Because one of the other ideas we had was that he was writing his diary on a molecule so that no one could read it, but it was too small, and we wanted something that seemed on the Paul Bunyan scale, basically, because that's how I saw it.
Right,
this,
tall tale, yeah.
Superman loses his powers under red sunlight, right? Friends in high places.
Where is Superman? Do you fear the tyrant's son? Face the scourge of worlds.
Luthor.
This is great, this moment. The Scourge of Worlds. When do you get to hear that?
I know. Well, again, that's the kind of thing, it's like, wow, that's really corny. I would never have done that in any other movie, but here it's like, I felt right to do it. So.
Because Superman's allowed to do this stuff.
Right.
These are like your dreams. This is Jungian mythic. You know, you can get away with this. Batman couldn't face this guy.
No. No. Now, I have to say, this is one of those moments that when we first got the raw footage back from Korea, the director, Sam Liu, was the shot of Superman flying off with the robots following him. In his mind, he wanted it to be like this big epic thing. And when we saw the animation, there was nothing wrong with the animation, but it didn't quite have that feel. But again, once Chris delivered this with the score, it's like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
This is huge. It's like, wow, okay, that's exactly what we wanted it to feel like. So the music brings such a big element to it that it's like I can't even describe what a big difference it makes.
It should work long enough for me to take care of you.
No, your son is dying, but I kill you first.
Stop this! Whatever Luthor offered you, he'll betray you.
I betray Luthor first. I will eat your son and replace it in the sky.
Yeah, it's another fantastic moment, and just another step up, which is great, you know, because I don't think anyone who hadn't read the book just isn't expecting this guy turning up.
Yeah, he's kind of like a horny beach ball or something. But he's cool though.
No. Solaris overrode Robot 7's program. Robot 7 stole Super Serum for Luthor. Robot 7 must atone.
And I see everyone becomes a good guy around Superman.
See?
Even
Exactly.
the Sun Eater.
Even the Sun Eater and even the silly robot. And it's like, yeah.
Forgive me.
To me, it's kind of like, I know this is a really bad reference, but that Dino De Laurentiis Flash Gordon movie, there's a great moment in there where he's on the Tilt-A-Whirl thing with Prince Baron, played by Timothy Dalton. And Prince Baron's trying to kill Flash, and Flash is like, no matter, you can kill me, but just promise that when I'm dead, you'll all team up and fight, Ming. And it's like, it's really corny. They kind of played it for laughs because he's so good that he's corny, but even so, even in that movie, it kind of moved me. It's just kind of like, it's because he affects Prince Baron. Prince Baron becomes a good guy because of that. And I kind of feel like Superman's kind of the same way here. It's like, you kind of don't want to like him because he really is, really too good, but you can't help but like him.
And what are you going to do without him,
Right.
Do we really want to feel that way?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, I want to hang on to my cynicism. I want to be cool. I want to be dark and gritty, but... So...
Superman must have...
I've been all of these things and I still think Superman's the coolest.
What?
I've been all of these things and I
Uh.
still think Superman's the coolest. I've been dark and gritty and grim. Superman's still the coolest.
Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane.
Unfortunately, we have, speaking for all of the cynics in us, Nostalgia, Luthor. He was another great old character that we updated.
Oh, was she actually from the comics
she was
from the
from
old
the
days?
70s. They threw her in. She was nothing like that girl at all, but she was this kind of...
Wow, I didn't realize she was from the old days.
Yeah, her name was Nostalgia Nemesis.
Wow.
And she was Luthor's niece, and she was in Supergirl stories as a Supergirl villainess for a while. As kind of, she wore the same kind of modish clothes as the early 70s Supergirl, and she seemed like a great one for revival. Nobody touched her since then. It seemed ridiculous. Such a great character, Luthor's niece who wants to rule the world.
That's funny because that seems like such a total Grant Morrison idea to me that I'm surprised to hear that she was actually from the comics.
Well, we refined it quite heavily.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, but yes, she's an original DC character.
That's awesome.
And there was a lot of them because obviously we made up a lot of new ones. So there was
Sure.
there was always trying to find that balance of let's do every age of Superman and represent everything, but at the same time we'll throw in things that are new, like Krull or Meccano Man in the comic, or like Solaris, which are new but kind of feel old school almost.
I was amazed when I read the comic that you guys actually did a really cool take on Doomsday. Because you talk about using all the different eras of Superman. That would be one that I thought, they're not even going to bother with that. But you kind of tied that into like those old Jimmy Olsen stories where he's always kind of mutating into weird monsters and heroes and stuff.
And the Project thing, which was the same, the Kirby stuff also had Jimmy mutating into monsters. So that kind of story arc was there for that character.
He's the least.
And getting to see Luthor in those cool, quietly clothes, he'll never look as good in anything else.
No, that's true. Yeah, that took a lot of back and forth too. We did a zillion designs of Luthor in that outfit, and it's like, oh no, now he's too tall. Now his pants look too baggy. Now it looks too tight. Now it doesn't look as cool as it does in the comic. So
I would actually dress like that. I would quite happily.
I'm sure you would. I was going to say, when I see Professor Quintum, I go, I can see Grant wearing those clothes.
Yeah, you can see a lot of the same fashion influence in both these evil scientist characters.
Yep. That's my one regret is that we weren't able to give Quintum that rainbow colored jacket. That's like really awesome, but
Superman won't be coming to the rescue.
That's too bad, because without him, we're screwed. Look at these pictures from our Singapore desk. The sun is turning blue.
Don't you get it? Solaris double-crossed you and poisoned the sun, you vain, stupid...
Yeah, this was a hard one to do because the sun was down.
This
and
was
we
really
had
confusing.
to show that the sun was blue, and I'm saying, how can I show this? Because in Metropolis the sun's down, and this is really annoying, and I had to just mention it in passing.
Sometimes I forget about it myself. It's like, oh yeah, there's a blue sky out there. It's like, oh, but it just looks like night. It's like, it's not because the sun is blue. It's just night. I know this was kind of complicated. We went back and forth on this quite a bit. It's like, wait a minute. So there's the red sun because of Solaris. Now, what does that? Does that mean the sky turns red too? Or
But what it meant was that had to happen at night, which meant we couldn't show the real sun, which would be on the other side of the world.
Exactly. Yeah. No. This was because theoretically this is supposed to be the world lit by the blue sun because Solaris has turned the sun blue.
Yeah, but it's not risen yet because Solaris had to rise in America to fight Superman at night.
Yeah, this is the stuff we...
So I had to work all this out on the chart. I'm like, oh no, because it'd have been so great if the sun could come up, and I'm trying to make it real. See, people don't believe we're trying to make these ridiculous things real.
No, of course you do. I know sometimes it seems kind of silly. It's like, oh yeah, we're just making stories about guys with in their underwear beating the crap out of each other, but you have to take it seriously. You have to put in that extra effort. So...
Hard to stay in the air? I just increased your personal gravity 500 times. That's not why I used the gravity gun, though.
So this was great to see this fight played out, because I think, as I say, we had like 5 panels.
All right.
Or something, and it was still quite good because we had the subway train.
Oh, yeah,
I knew there was
absolutely.
a good setup in there, you know, falling through the ground into a subway train, so it was nice to see it all played out.
Yeah, no, you still had like really epic ideas that still communicated, you know, without having to do all the in-between shots and stuff. So, I mean, yeah, all this is unnecessary in a comic, but you kind of need to do it in a film. Yeah, I think there's literally like 5 panels in the subway, whereas here we do all the stuff with the third rail. Yeah, Superman's kind of passive throughout this, and I was watching it kind of going, God, Superman's just getting his ass kicked. But I don't mind it. It's kind of like he kind of knows he's just, you know, he's just waiting for Luthor's 24 hours to be up.
Yeah, he knows he's winning.
Yep.
And in my story, obviously, I end up with him actually hitting him because he just gets angry.
Right. That's true, you did.
Because I wanted that moment of even when Luthor finally achieves enlightenment, Superman kind of snaps. So there's a double reflex going on there. But I think for this, it was better to leave that out and to see more of the fight, the way it plays. So, yeah. Luthor needed to give the guy a kick in anyway.
Yeah.
He's doing it for everyone who hates Superman.
Oh, coming right up here is, again, one of my favorite images from the comics is Luthor just kind of calmly walking in midair, which I think is really, really neat.
Well, that's the first thing I'd do if I had superpowers, is walk around in midair and really freak people out.
Really? Instead of flying? Just,
well, it'd be the
you still
scariest,
walk?
wouldn't they realise you're just like 3 feet above the ground? Would be so frightening if you did it just in a mall or something.
I just like how casual he is about it. It's just great.
Because Superman flies, he walks.
Are you okay?
Better than okay.
So her name was actually Nostalgia, huh?
Yeah.
Because even that sounds like something you would make up.
I know, doesn't it?
Wow, that's amazing.
I'm also good at selecting.
Oh, very good.
This is a great scene, though. This really works.
Einstein couldn't connect the gravitational force to
Yeah, this one took a while with Anthony LaPaglia because he was he got the concept, but to get that specific feel of wonderment was so far away from the way he'd been playing Luthor all through the movie. Because in the movie he's so kind of evil and Dr. Lecterish, and here he actually has to kind of go, oh my God.
It's the payoff of Luthor's are so utterly materialistic, and everything's, can you put it in a barrel, can you weigh it? And suddenly he sees that the material structure of things is more profound. It's he finds in matter the transcendence. You know, that's what happens to him. It's not spiritual for him. He's seeing how everything works.
Right.
You know.
together.
No, it's a cool moment.
You are embarrassing me beyond therapy.
Yeah, it's better than just beating him up.
He just figured out how everything works.
Gravity warps time. Superman trapped me in a relativistic conundrum.
He's trying to say his 24 hours of superpowers just ran out.
But it's only been a couple of hours.
Relative to us, the gravity gun sped up his clock a little.
You think I didn't make more of it?
Looking for this?
Give it back! I saw everything! I saw...
And that's actually how it would work. We researched the science on it. If you increase someone's gravity, time speeds up for them. So
is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Superman's no fool.
I thought you made that up.
No.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is actually tragic.
Oh,
this
yeah,
is
I
actually...
loved this scene. He played it so well.
Mattered to you, Luthor? You could have saved the world years ago.
You're right.
Oh, your poor face.
No one can repair the sun but me, Lord.
Well, this is the bit. We were sitting in tears.
Oh, yeah, I know, me too.
Me and Kristen.
Yeah, this is like I said, this is probably the 5th time he's like said goodbye to somebody in this movie, but this is the final one.
Yeah, this is it.
So this is the big one.
That's all you've ever needed.
I love you, Lois Lane. Until the end of time.
And again, that's one of those crazy hokey lines. It's like
not a
you
dry
would never
seat in
say
the
it.
house.
I know, but it's perfect. He delivers it perfectly, and it's Superman. It's on a bigger scale.
Yeah, and it's only Superman can you get away with it. So you should get away with it. I think. That's my defense, Your Honor.
So, do you think that he's actually alive at the end of the movie, or do you think that this is like literally a death of Superman story?
Well, I think with it, I thought it through because I wanted it to have that, because the best Superman stories always have a death of Superman component in them, you know, all the way through back to the original. And but I thought because it's Superman, he has to have a mythic death. He has to have a kind of mythic continuation as well as a physical continuation. And the physical continuation was the whole science thing where it combines the genes and all that.
Right.
Allowed Superman to have heirs, you know, which meant he could actually have the physical continuity, but also this notion that, yeah, he's still out there, children still speak of Superman, and when he finishes that engine, he'll be back, you know, and he might be back tomorrow, he might be back in a million years. So I wanted it to have that, the never-ending moment of he goes into mythology. It's now the dream time, you know. It's just people tell stories of the man in the sun building the engine.
So it's kind of like a King Arthur thing again as well. It's like, when we need him, he'll be back, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was to give him two endings. Like, he was allowed to move on. He allowed to have children and descendants, so you've got those stories, and then he's allowed to be the perfect mythic figure who's kind of eternal, never-ending. And it was taken as it was the star thing as well, the all-star thing.
He's up there fixing the sun. And when he's done...
When we got to the end of the movie, we thought, okay, is this going to be really a downer that, Superman's actually dead? But, you know, we have that great Frank Quietly shot that's like, you know, kind of UPA him, you know, working in the sun and putting Lois's line about, you know, he'll be, you know, when he's done fixing the sun, he'll be back. I kind of felt like that kind of took the curse off of the sadness a little bit, that, you know, maybe he literally will be back someday, or, you know, we'll have, you know, his heir, like you said. But it's not like a typical death of a character. It's like you said, it does have that mythical kind of resonance to it. So, and it is you're trying to create that definitive feel, so that of course you can continue this story. But if it's the last one, then that was it, you know. And it was we wanted to have our cake and eat it. This was great as well. You read 70 years of material and you try to distill it into what to you feels the right, and the character does the work in a way, because if you get it wrong, the character will let you know. Yep. And that's why it's 1,000 drawings or 1,000 attempts to just get the voice right. Or well, the other beautiful thing about characters like Superman and Batman is that they're so iconic that you can play with them a lot. There's a lot of different ways you can go with the characters. I mean, you know, like I say this a lot of times when we're doing Batman movies, but it's like, I like the Adam West Batman as much as I like, you know, the Christopher Nolan Batman. To me, that they're of equal value, and there's a lot of shades in between that you can play, and sometimes you can play them in the same movie or in the same story. It's like you do that in your Batman comics. It's like you've got like a relatively realistic Batman, but then you also got like the League of Batman, you know, who are like just a bunch of you know lunatics. So
and I think people have become postmodern enough to buy that, you know, to watch Adam West now and think, okay, that's just that version of Batman, or to watch the Chris Nolan version, or to watch even, you know, the Schumacher stuff, which I've been watching again. I love the colours, and I love the... There was a notion of Batman there, this disco Batman, where it's so flamboyant and ridiculous, and the bat has grown into a gigantic silver shield. But I think all of that has its place, and I think it triggers thoughts of, hey, what if Batman was so demonstrative? What story would I get from that? All of these versions of Batman, even the early serials, which I watched recently, all the Superman stuff, the most ridiculous, clambering characters in pyjamas, give you some idea for, imagine Batman with no money, or imagine Batman with... So I think they all have value, and people are smart enough now to recognise them as this huge kaleidoscope of the central character.
So I guess we're coming to the end here. So, well, thank you all for watching. This is Bruce Timm signing out.
Yeah, this is Grant Morrison. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to this ramble.
All right. See you guys later.
See ya.